such a long day. What?
Oh, yeah, you get it.
I'm exhausted.
Oh, well, thanks for
okay.
being here and doing this.
No,
You gotta
it's not
turn
on.
it on when you're ready to rock.
Hello. Where?
There we go. Should be good.
Oh, what's that?
It disconnects. All right, good evening, everybody. How we all doing? How's this mic sound?
Not.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Can I get a holler?
Hello.
Can I get a whoop? Can I get this going, please? Can I get some sound? Got the pizza crew over here. Do people get some popcorn out in the back? All right. Hang with us, please. Still need to wait for the sun to go down anyway. Okay. All right.
Whoa.
Rock on. Good times. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up to this fun Science on Screen event hosted by Science Moab, which of course is our local nonprofit that shares all of the cool science that preeminent scientists like Jayne Belnap here are doing in this area. They have podcasts, they have their show on ZMU, excuse me. Woo!
Woo! Too many drinks.
Too many of these Pellegrinos. Before we start, just a quick shout out. There's some merchandise in the back, so go check that out. Grab some popcorn. Of course, contribute to the donation box. If you'd like to grab a sticker, you can contribute to the donation box, which Christina has here. Thank you. And of course, there's some Dr. Strangelove stickers from last month, which are on sale, designed by local Lauren Hagen. Thank you to the Coolidge Corner Theatre and the ALFRED P. SLOAN Foundation, to Moab, to Monument Valley Film Commission, to the Moab Sports and Recreation, KZMU, MISO Filming, and all the volunteers that put this event on. We appreciate it. The next film, yeah, right on. The next event is going to be June 18th, which is going to be the showing of Jurassic Park, and with paleontologist John Hankla. But tonight we're here for The Martian and to speak with Dr. Jayne Belnap. For those of you who don't know or just appreciate a little Wikipedia action on Jayne Belnap, she is a dryland ecologist, worked here in Moab at USGS just down the road for 30 years. She studies dryland ecosystems, so it's a good thing that she lives here, but she's worked all over the world, from Antarctica, Africa, Australia, studying different ecosystems. She's certainly received numerous awards, but the one that is most notable and worth mentioning is that she's just recently been inducted into the National Academy of Sciences, which is no doubt the most prestigious. So cool. So it's awesome to have you here, and perhaps like me, I don't know the first thing about dryland ecosystems. It's not my jam, but I've enjoyed seeing the work that Jayne has done, that all of you have seen if you've been to a trailhead or read the caution notes in Mountain Project or looked at the informationals on our bike trails that tell us to stay on the path and don't bust the crust. Don't tiptoe on the crypto. Don't soil the soil. I don't think that's one. I just made that up, and we won't do it. So without further ado, let me ask you to all give us a warm welcome for Jayne Belnap.
Woo! Thank you. Woo. Get away from me.
All right, I'll go over here.
Get away from me.
So tonight, we're going to show The Martian, and of course, The Martian is a really fun movie to be showing here in Moab because it kind of looks like we live on Mars. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you, Jayne, was why is that?
Why does this place look like Mars?
Yeah.
Has everybody seen pictures of Mars with the rover and stuff? I mean, it really does look just like out there. It's lack of water. Water, 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 water. It's a water carved landscape when the water is now gone. So it makes it be very similar to this environment. Lots of sand blowing around, eroding surfaces, making them those wind carved shapes and things.
Amazing. And you say that there's wind carving it out as well. Are these dust storms and things that we experience here in Moab, is this a precursor to us turning back into Mars, or what's happening with this?
Well, no, Mars has no atmosphere, so we got a long ways to go. We could do it, though, if we really worked hard. More ozone layer loss, things like that.
Okay.
But no, it's a couple of like bazillion years away.
All right, well, that's good to know. But even on the short-term scale, we hear of these terms like desertification and these kind of things. Is that a negative term, and does that accurately represent what's going on?
I hate that word.
Okay.
It makes it sound like deserts are bad. Are deserts bad? No! Deserts are great. And so that word is kind of awful because it makes it sound like turning something into a desert's a really bad thing. What they really mean is a degraded landscape. And so I don't ever use that word. It sucks. I mean, it's bad. Juju.
All right. Well, we won't use it.
Don't use it.
So, you study soil, not dirt, right?
Oh, no.
Can you help me understand what the difference
dirt
is?
too.
All right.
So the thing you do if you really want to drive a soil scientist crazy is you say dirt instead of soil and just watch them cringe. It's really fun. So whenever I go to like big soil meetings and stuff, I always say that I study dirt and they all go, eh! And it's great. Supposedly soil is the great thing that has lots of nutrients and holds up plants and gets them to grow. And dirt is stuff that ends up on your cheeks and your face when you fall down and do a face plant. So supposedly that's the difference, but it's always fun to call it dirt because it is.
Dirt's just more fun.
Dirt doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't. Well, so what's the deal with biological soil crusts then? Is that dirt and soil mixed together?
No, because dirt and soil are the same thing.
Okay.
But soil crusts, of course, are the coolest thing ever. Did that kill your eardrums? So those guys, I think everybody knows what they are. Yeah? Yeah? Woo! Woo! Mosses, lichens, cyanobacteria, all those black bumpy things out there. And actually even it's the pink stuff that you can't see anything on yet. And it's really what's gluing this place in place. So we need to be really nice and careful with them. And I think the next question is about them and Mars, isn't it?
It can be.
Okay, let's do it.
Whatever you want to launch into it. You tell me.
So that's because of where they live and what they do. The idea is that, if you think about it, the Earth used to be just a ball of rock because there weren't any plants yet. And so the question was, if the rocks weather into soil and there's all these winds blowing around because there's no plants to slow it down, why did the soil stay in place? And so that's when people started thinking about the biocrust, because they're so good at stabilizing soils. They can, even those little potholes you see out in the slick rock, they're really shallow, but they're completely stable because of the biocrust. So the idea is that if they were ever going to terraform Mars, it would be basically making a biocrust for the Martian surface. And NASA has been pursuing this for many years. And they have a program which they spend $1 bazillion trying to figure out how they could get these same guys to grow on Mars. And they called me and asked probably 10 years ago if I'd like to be part of their program, and offered me tons and tons of money forever. And I said, no, I want you to take that money and conserve Earth. They hung up on me and they didn't ask me anymore. But they do have a big program. And actually, kidding aside, that wasn't kidding, but kidding aside, it's done a really great job of helping us understand these cyanobacteria, because they've been pouring all this money into what kinds of extreme conditions can they stand and how much can they handle of what and things like that. So we've learned a lot because of it. But these are exactly what they would put on Mars if they were wanted to terraform Mars, which is what they call it. They want to make it an Earth-like surface.
So is that how it works? You just pour cyanobacteria out there, and then the fungi start walking in, and they pull in lichen, and they're like, let's all hang out?
No, because you don't have any atmosphere there, so there's nothing for them to breathe. So they're talking, this is all still under some big dome structure where they can pump in and make an artificial atmosphere. But then the cyanobacteria use carbon dioxide. We use oxygen. Those guys use carbon dioxide and then they give off oxygen like plants do. So the whole idea is under that dome, they'd put all the cyanobacteria in there, and then they could plant some plants, and then they'd pump CO2 in there, and then they would convert it to oxygen so the people could live. So it would be actually a really fun thing to try. Why not?
Are we pretty good at doing that here on Earth? Like, can we just take what we know and do it there inside the dome?
Well, they got some experiments where they're trying. Biosphere 2 down in Arizona is trying it. So they've got, and they're okay. They're not bad at it. They're actually doing better than you would expect. But to try to imagine how to scale that to a planet's kind of like, oh, okay, let's spend. Oh, I forgot to tell you the best part. The guy at NASA said, "You're going to regret this when your children don't have anywhere to live." That was the best. Sorry, I forgot the punchline. But yeah, anyway.
No, it's true. It's hard
to
find a
but
place
to
to
scale
live
it, I mean, you're talking 6 billion people. How are you going to get them there? How are you going to, so a few people would get to go.
So you were saying that the crust stabilizes the dirt and keeps it from dust storms and things like this. Does it help bring in the trees and the other plants and animals and facilitate a richer ecosystem? Or
we actually don't know that. We guess that because they add nitrogen and other nutrients to the soil, but we really haven't shown whether they're necessary or not. They certainly enhance that which is there, but that doesn't mean they were necessary for the things to get there. So somebody who wants a dissertation topic, that's a great one.
Any takers?
Takers?
So can I ask how climate change is impacting what we know about soil crusts, and also just how human impact is?
Bad juju. These guys, although they live in deserts, and so you think they could put up with anything, are actually, not the cyanos, but the lichens and the mosses are actually on a pretty thin edge. And they are dropping out of these systems here pretty rapidly. We've lost a lot in the last 20 years because it's been so hot and dry. So these guys don't mind dry. They can do dry. They can do dry for 100 years and you water them and they're alive. But hot and dry is really a bad thing. And that's because when it does rain, spurt. These guys turn on and start to photosynthesize, and they start burning up all the stores that they had of carbon, and then they dry too fast because it's hot. And so then they have a real problem because they go into a deficit, and they can't do that very many times before they die. So hot and dry, and then, they're going along and then they get wet. It's actually not helping if that rainstorm isn't a significant rainstorm. It's a bad idea.
So if we're thinking about the surface of Mars, obviously not covered with life so far as we know, and back in the day when Earth was first starting to be covered with these single cellular organisms, was it a big crust, a mat of biological soil crust back in the day, or when do we think those things came around?
Here or on Mars?
Here.
Here! Well, we don't really know. There's stromatolites that we do know about that are like, a billion years old, 1.1 billion, I think, that are in the rocks. But they're things that form in water. It's the same species, but they form in water. Because the problem is that these guys are soft-walled, so there's nothing to preserve. It's really hard to see them in a soil profile because nothing is going to, there's no bones and there's no fingernails and there's none of that stuff that gets preserved. So we've been looking for a long time for signatures of chemistry to say, okay, something was photosynthesizing here, but we have not been successful to find something that lasts 1,000,000 years. And that's what you'd need. And the same thing for Mars. You're going to need to find some compound that's stable for that long, which is asking a lot.
So when we see the different soils, like some of them are very well developed and they're like black and they look like little mini mountain ranges, and some of them are sort of subtle and hard to tell the difference. Is that because there's different types of animals that are making up that big symbiotic relationship, or are they just...
It's most likely because someone squished them. Bad people. Most of this landscape would be nice and dark and bumpy if things weren't walking on top of these guys. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be feet. It can be tires. It can be deer hooves. It can be whatever. One of the things most people don't appreciate is we didn't have very many deer here until we decided to hunt them, and we decided that that was a great way for the division to make a lot of money, and so we have upped the population of the deer dramatically. There was about 13,000 of them here estimated in 1900, and now we have about 420,000. So there's a lot of hooves out there that didn't used to be out there, and then we've added a lot of other insults as well. You know, there's other hooves, but there's people and bikes and you name it. And then, you know, probably the worst part is that we disturb one area so it's not stable anymore, and then it blows onto another area. Well, these guys need light, and so if they're buried, they just die. So it's not just a direct impact. We've had a huge impact on the at the landscape level through blowing sand. Like, go up to sand flats and just sort of look around. All that pink you see isn't because someone drove right there. There's all this pink in between bushes and things where it's clear no one drove. It's just that it like blew over from where it was disturbed. So there's a lot of indirect impacts as well.
Could we be doing a better job, you think, of trying to mitigate the what sound like secondary effects of...
We really don't know how to restore crusts. We've tried and tried and tried, and frankly, we're really bad at it. So our only choice right now is to educate people to stay off of them in the first place. Good idea! You know, if you don't wreck it, you don't have to fix it. And we don't know how to fix it. So we're still trying, but don't wreck it till we know how to fix it. But now you have to ask me whether or not I think we're Martians.
Are we Martians?
Yes. I have a cute story. When I was doing my dissertation way back in the Dark Ages, one of the questions the faculty asked me was, quote, "Since Earth is a closed system, how do you explain ... And I wrote, and I said, Earth is not a closed system. There's stuff coming in from outer space all the time, and we don't have enough scientific technology to know whether or not there's life in there. Well, since then they've found it. We get hundreds of tons of stuff bombarding Earth every year, and it's got good stuff inside. So I've decided we actually are Martians, and that we can't, you know, claim that life truly evolved here. I mean, yeah, but the seeds came from Mars, so we are Martians. So, haha, Mr. NASA, we're actually doing okay.
Is that what those spiders that send themselves up
Yeah!
in the atmosphere are all about?
Yeah, those guys.
They're trying to launch out of
Yeah,
orbit?
they're trying to launch out of orbit.
That's pretty awesome. One of my favorite things that cover the surface of the rock, this dark patina, desert varnish, is that a biological cliff crust?
Nobody knows. There is a lot of debate about desert varnish, and nobody can answer you because my opinion is that it's different in different places. And so when you're trying to find one explanation, it's not going to explain it because you have always an exception. You can always find it. So we ran around and looked at whether there was anything alive in the varnish on these rocks. And there's definitely lots of bacteria and fungi living on the north and east exposures. In the south and west, even though they're stained black, there's nothing alive. So the main hypotheses for the desert varnish is, one, it's bioaccumulation. So the bacteria and the fungi are accumulating things from the dust that's blowing around, manganese, iron, things like that, that stain the dark color, stain the rock black. The second idea is that the water that used to be where water ran down, and I should say, but that clay stuck to where it was wet, and so that's why you get the streaks. The second idea is that the water is actually leaching that out of the rocks, and so it's coming from the inside of the rocks and being pulled out and then precipitated on the face of the rock when the water evaporates. And then the third idea is that there's no bioaccumulation. It's just the clays have lots of manganese and iron, which it does, and it's sticking to those wet surfaces. And so probably the answer is all of the above. The only problem is then you go down to something like Yuma, Arizona, and the ground is completely covered with rocks, flat, on the ground that are covered with desert varnish. So then how do you explain that one? It's not on a cliff, it's nowhere near water, and they're all black, and you turn the rock over and it's white on the other side. I mean, it's a varnish for sure. So I don't know.
That's wild.
But yeah, people really don't understand this.
Well, and it must take a long time to grow, because isn't this what the petroglyphs are carved into?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Those
it's
are
got to
old.
be slow. Because none of these organisms, if it has anything to do with biology, nothing's going to be active unless it's wet. And if it's the clay theory, it's not going to happen until it's wet. And we all know that these waterfalls, for instance, don't go every time it rains. They only go every once in a while, so that's the only time it's going to happen in that spot. So it's going to take a really long time.
Yeah. So, but have we seen evidence of desert varnish on Mars? Or what's the coloration that we see when we see the images of cliff faces in Mars?
I have never heard that word discussed in terms of Mars.
Okay.
Has anybody? I don't think so. But they might not think that either. They might just have manganese staining, but I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
Mystery.
the reason I was interested is whether that means that maybe, all right, we might have come from Mars, but is there still different life on Mars? Do we have any evidence to suggest this?
Well, first of all, there always seems to be life where there's water, and Mars is very clearly a water-carved planet. There is no doubt about it. And we are finding life now down miles in Earth. It's awesome. Like these guys are just living down there eating who knows what. And so I think we just haven't gotten down deep enough into Mars. But I'll bet you we find our ancestors down there.
And by ancestors, do you think that they would have the same, genetic codes and things, or could they work similarly but have different blueprints?
Here's one of the problems we have with UFOs and aliens and that. Have you noticed how they all look like people? What are the odds? We're a carbon-based life form that depends a lot on water. There's no reason other life forms are going to be carbon-based. So probably not, but I still like to fantasize that our ancestors are deep in the innards of Mars. But it's kind of funny to me how all the blobby-headed guys, they all have 2 arms and 2 legs, eyes, a mouth. It's like, okay.
It's not the only answer.
It's not the only answer. You could be a thing of octopus.
Yeah.
Or amoebas. That would be cool. We all and dinner. We could be starfish and avert our stomachs onto the table and digest outside ourselves and suck the food up. Wouldn't that be awesome? Just think of how our table manners would be so different. Please pass never mind.
I would have never had to go eat in the bathroom with the
Right.
dog when I was
Nope,
a kid.
never again.
So on Mars, and we watch this Martian, and everybody knows that even in Total Recall and all these things, that you got to wear a helmet if you're out in the Martian atmosphere, or it's not an atmosphere, but there's a lot of CO2 and this kind of thing. And would it
there's not enough gravity on Mars, so we don't have this nice layering of atmosphere to protect us like we have here. So there's nothing to keep the oxygen down where we can breathe it. When it's whatever's there is just flying around and mixing with things that we don't breathe. So yeah, there's no way to do it without domes and helmets and living inside. You'd be pretty unhappy out there without your helmet.
So in The Martian, because I hadn't seen it before, and I've seen it now, but the only thing I knew about it was that he grows potatoes.
Yep.
Right, and he has the Martian dirt.
Yep.
And then he makes soil.
Yeah.
In a creative way by taking the human waste and mixing it in. And is
Yep.
that basically how you make soil? And is that realistic? Like, could we grow a potato doing that?
Well, you could grow a potato doing that if you were really desperate. You could also go to the hardware store and get some nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer. But yeah, you could. It's just not kind of the way you'd probably do it because you're bringing in a lot of pathogens and things that are going to make you really sick. So it's not a great idea to just put like poo straight onto stuff. No, you need to compost it and kill it all first. It's kind of one of the flaws there, but you can wash it really well, maybe.
I think that's what he did.
But it's not very realistic on a large scale.
So you said that it doesn't have a lot of gravity on Mars. Is that because it's quite a bit smaller than Earth, or?
Well, hang on. One thing about the previous question too is that you can definitely take Martian soil and make it fertile to grow stuff. I mean, that is not a problem. That's pretty like okay to do because we do that right here. Our sandy soils here have almost no nutrients in them. The reason that we have gardens and things is that we add them. You know, we do go to the hardware store and get the nitrogen and the phosphorus and things and put it in, or we do compost piles, or we add organic matter or something. But that's the way we make the sand here fertile, and that's the same thing would work there if you really wanted to do it. So that part's actually pretty realistic. He could definitely do what he did. Not good when the thing rips, though.
Not good when it rips.
Not good. No.
No spoiler alert.
Oh, whoops.
Well, let me open it up to the audience. Do people have any questions for Dr. Belnap? From soil crust to Mars to more insights on what we all look like as Martians here on this planet? Any burning questions out there? Please feel free. Yeah,
burning.
Go for it.
You know, I always wanted to make a horror movie about cryptos where like all the filaments, there's laying in their bed and the filaments come on and go, ah! Wouldn't that be awesome? That's what we need.
Well, let me stop just so that everybody knows what the question was, which is...
Yeah, sorry.
What fatalistic things can we tell everyone out there to keep them from quit busting our crust?
Yeah, so a horror movie would be great. And there actually was one. I can't remember who did it here in town, but it was hysterical. And these men kept disappearing. And it was after they'd stepped on crust. And they were found dead and sucked dry later. It was perfect. Anyway, most people think of deserts as just dirt and rocks. And that to me is the worst, is they're going to make it into something that's just dirt and rocks. And that's really not what a desert is. There's all sorts of cool things that live in deserts. And if you just have giant blowing sandstorms and all the soils are washing away every time it rains, that's pretty brutal because you lose them and you are going to lose the soil. And if you lose the soil, you aren't going to have the plants and things. So that to me is kind of like the worstest thing I can think of to tell them. But I like the horror movie more. People will relate much better.
Yeah, question here. Let me repeat it too. The question is, Jayne, could you tell us one of the more memorable or beautiful experiences you've had in your career studying crust?
Yeah. Well, there isn't one because it happens every time I get down on my knees and look at them. There's just this wonder of these little tiny guys doing so much. It just blows me away every single time. And you water a moss and it comes unfurled and it flays out and it's all green and it's just like the most awesome thing ever. So I don't have one because it happens every day. Groundhog Day! I can't
Bill Murray.
think of one. No, that's, yeah. It's every time. I mean, it's just stunning that these little guys can do so much.
It is pretty special, and sometimes, you know, you can see it if it's raining, but is it okay to throw your water bottle on a little bit of
No.
crust and say, let me see you come into action?
No. Okay, if you do that, you got to do a lot. Because again, remember what I said, if they get just wet for a little bit of time, they're going to die. So you got to give them enough. If you go and pee on them, you got to pee on them enough to keep them wet for an hour. That's a lot. So probably
set your
peeing on
clocks.
them's not a great idea, but your whole water bottle would be awesome.
Okay, good. Good
But
to know.
an hour. Think that, when it's 102 out at noon, that's not very, that's a lot of water. Yeah, and I did that for years. I'd show tourists, and I go, oh, look, it's going to turn green. And then I'd leave, and they were going to, it was really bad.
All right, well, then we'll stop doing it. That'll be next on the post.
No, just the whole water bottle. Then they'll love it.
I got a question over here.
Weep, weep.
The question is,
Yeah.
why is an hour the magic number?
So these guys, they breathe in CO2, they make it into carbon, and they have it in their cells for repairing all sorts of things, because pigments degrade and membranes degrade in the sunlight from the UV. So they've got to remake all that stuff before they can actually start to fix more carbon. And so it takes them about that long to get everything back to be equal to when they first got wet. And it's variable for different species, but that's a good round number, is an hour, for them to get back all the carbon they lost, fixing all those membranes and all those things, and respiring and breathing out, so they're equal and can then gain from the experience. And that in the lab, we did this experiment with mosses, the most common moss, and it was 5 millimeters of rainfall applied. So that's on a single little spot. That's a good rainstorm for us. That's not these little spurts. So it's a pretty good rainstorm. And it's cloudy when it's raining, so it stays longer than when you water it at 100 degrees in the sun. Your leg went up, I saw it.
What do you mean by fix carbon?
Fix carbon.
Like
Good
repaired
question.
it?
So there's all this carbon dioxide flying around in the air, and it takes plants or something green, grass, things like that, to make it into carbon. So we can't do it, although I've tried eating fungi and getting on my skin thinking I could be photosynthetic. That would be pretty cool. Don't have to eat. Yeah. But it's really important that we have that, because we all eat plants for their carbon and the other nutrients in there. But that's really a common currency for a lot of organisms, is the carbon. And we all, same with nitrogen. Nitrogen's flying around in the air. It's not a form that we can take in and use to build cells. We need bacteria to fix that. And it's just taking it out of the air and making it into a different form that we can use. So we're very dependent on green things and on bacteria for life. Whoa, back there! You have to yell!
Favorite What's your favorite species of lichen or moss, and why is it your favorite?
My favorite is the black lichen Kalima. And it's my favorite because when it gets wet, it swells up and it looks like Ulva, the sea lettuce. It like turns into this translucent green. It's really cool. And it fixes nitrogen too, so it's one of our major fixers and helps our ecosystem tremendously. And inside of it, the cyanobacteria inside of it is nostoc, and that's my favorite cyanobacteria too. So I get this little package of favoriteness with one species. I'm cheating.
So is it a species when it's even a combo, like symbiotic relationship between two different things?
So
we call it a species?
A lichen is the combination of a fungi and either a cyanobacteria or a green algae. And that this lichen, many fungi can capture different kinds of the green algae or the cyanobacteria. So the lichen is named after the fungus because the fungus is the consistent piece. Some fungus capture 2 or 3 kinds of cyanobacteria or green algae. And so you've got these other little guys packed in there, but it's the fungi, and it's also the fungi that's reproducing. It's sending out spores, that spore germinates, and it goes looking for a partner. So it's really comes down to the fungi for the name. But don't believe anyone when they say it's a symbiosis. I don't believe it for a second. I think they're prisoners of war because they're free living in the soil. Why? They don't need the fungus. You know, the fungus makes them leak the carbon and the nitrogen they fix to support the fungus. So, like, what's up with that? And people always say, oh, it gives them a protection and a house to live in. But they're already free living in the soil. They don't need that house. So, yeah.
So it's
prisoners of war.
It's different than the microbes that are imprisoned in our guts? Or?
They're not imprisoned. They could poop out if they wanted.
Sometimes too often.
And sometimes they do.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because that's different. Because they're actually, well, maybe. Actually, I don't know. Because the question is, for symbiosis, both partners are supposed to benefit. And so you've got to ask the question whether both partners are benefiting. With the lichen, the fungus is definitely benefiting. But I see Zippo help of the fungus for the cyanobacteria. For the guys in our guts, I don't know. Because I don't know them very well. Harry, Johnny, you know. I don't know them. Any more?
Out there?
Whoa, way back there, scream! I lost him.
Let me just make sure that I got it here, but you were asking about hot and arid environments and how lichen can survive in that? Examples.
Antarctica.
So are there examples of cold and arid environments?
Antarctica is the driest desert on Earth, and there are cryptos there. I can testify.
But they're not your favorite?
Oh, no, I love them. They're cute.
Are they at all similar? Are they related to
what
we have here?
All our friends are there. Feels just like home.
Same dudes?
Same dudes.
Okay.
Just really cold. No.
It's not as cold as Mars?
No, but it's awfully cold there. In the winter, when it's dark. It's like, I don't know what it is, but it's really cold. But it's nowhere near Mars. Mars is way, way, way colder.
So what are they doing to get water when it's all frozen around
Oh, they
them?
don't care. These guys don't care if they're dry. They're pretty, they can, in herbariums, we literally can pull these guys that have been in there for 100, 150 years, water them, and they're alive. As long as they're dry, they're fine. It's just when they get wet with spurts and things like that. So they're fine the whole time they're dry. They don't care. Yeah.
Can
Well,
you transport? Let me just make sure everybody got it. Can we transport? Was it cyanobacteria from like a hot environment to a cold environment, and vice versa?
yes, you can, but we should note that there are ecotypes in the cyanobacteria world, and they don't do as well. So if I took the same cyanobacterial species from the Sonoran Desert and brought them up here, they will not do as well, and vice versa. Also, the balance down there is different. So we have the same species here as the Sonoran, but there's way more of some species there because they're doing better down there than here. So in essence, I'm bringing a community up here that's very different in proportion, and it will probably sort itself out and kind of, start to imitate this. But I'm scared of bringing weeds, because that ecotype thing, we don't know that much about classifying bacteria. We're pretty lousy at it because they don't cooperate. They're like have wild, kinky sex lives. And so it's really hard to classify them. So it's hard to know that you really have the same guy. It's much easier with a plant than it is with a cyano. So we're pretty nervous about that. And we try to get people that are doing larger restoration to culture the stuff they've got from where the place is, so that we at least know we're putting the same thing back. And then they die. But at least the same guys died, right? Transplanting works great here. So we've been doing that for years. If someone drives off the road, we take a rake out and basically rake some of the crust on the on the sides in, and that's what that is. That's transplanting from here to there. We've had bulldozers come along and just scrape the very top surface off and take it somewhere else. We've had front end loaders take islands, like this big, and just transport it somewhere else and plunk it down. It works great. What doesn't work great is when you're trying to take a large area. Those are obviously all very small efforts. When you're trying to take a large area and bring in something that was grown in a lab, that's where we're failing. So there's something we're doing when we grow them in the lab that is not helping them survive when we put them out, is my hypothesis, is that we've coddled them, or we've done something. I don't know what. Because we've tried hardening them off and doing all that, and it doesn't help. So, I don't know.
Over here.
Yeah.
The question was, do we monitor the grass and these things by remote sensing?
And yes, some places were better than others because it depends on how close they are to the color of the soil. But we can very often pick up if there's enough biomass, we can pick up the chlorophyll signal. And so as long as the crusts are pretty well developed, it's easy. If you get into really hot deserts where it's low biomass, it's a lot harder because there's just not that much chlorophyll for the satellite to pick up. But yeah, it's a great tool because we can't monitor everywhere all the time, except that way.
Wow, but that's all the way from a satellite.
Yeah.
Not from a little drone flying over.
Satellite.
Cool. Yeah, we got a question over here. The question is, if the crust can spring up when water's around and be very vibrant, like the moss unfurling, what makes it black?
Oh, okay. So when the crusts are really immature, it just looks like soil, but it's kind of it looks like soil that's sort of glued together. It's got a little crust on it, and that actually is mostly a physical crust. There's a little bit of salt in there, but the cyano are starting to show up. And then as they get more and more of them, they get darker and darker because they're just piling in there. So the first guy that comes in is named Microbes, and he's this big honkin' King Kong guy. And he's got all these filaments, and he's really good at swimming through loose sand. Once that guy stabilizes the surface, then you get these little tiny cyanobacteria come in, and they're actually pigmented, and they're pigmented dark. And that's to protect from the UV. So the more of these different little guys you get in, and the greater biomass you get of the King Kong guys, it gets darker and darker and darker. And that's what's making the black. Now, you have to be careful, though, because if you don't look carefully, a lot of that black are little pieces of lichen, because a lot of the lichens are black. So the way to tell the difference is the lichens grow above the surface, and the cyanobacteria are on or below the surface. So if it's just a smooth surface, it's the cyano, and the black is because of all of their biomass. If there's anything poking up, though, it's a lichen that's black. The mosses are dark, but they're generally not black.
The question was, I think if I got it right, that these organisms produce pigments to protect themselves from the UV. And what was the last? What other radiation can they withstand?
So these guys have, the pigments are actually pretty clever. So they've got color pigments that just keep the light and the UV from ever going into the cell. They've got these other pigments that just basically zoom around and grab any electrons that got in the cell anyway. So that pigment gets used up. It's kind of expensive, so they depend mostly on that color, so the light never gets in to do the damage. But electrons just bounce around, and they'll like poke holes in your membranes and blow up your chloroplasts, and they're not good. So they have these other little grabber guys that run around and grab. The other thing that they do is when they desiccate, these guys go completely dry. There's a class of organisms on the planet, and there's not very many that can, we got a lot of water in us. These guys, it's gone, and they're still alive. And so that actually is a defense, because they don't have all this juicy stuff for the electrons and other things to go flying around in. The other thing is they make a lot of sheath material and other gooey things to protect themselves when they're drying down. They secrete a lot of sticky, gooey stuff for that same reason. It acts as a little sun shield. Mosses are very cute. They curl up, and the backs of their leaves are brown, and they don't have any chlorophyll on them, so they don't get hurt at all. And then when they get wet, they uncurl and they flop out like that with the green to the sun. So there's also that little trick, but that's pretty much the tricks for radiation.
Would you say it again? I missed it, and it's just loud up here. Here, I'll hand it over. I'll give the last question to the mic here. If you don't mind repeating it, because I didn't catch it. Thanks, dude.
So the question was, is Mayberry Farms a government facility, a secret government facility to regrow crypto?
Woohoo!
Top secret, I don't know.
And not very secret, obviously.
Thank you.
That's one of the biggest trials that we have. We brought crusts from all over the western U.S. trying to grow them, thinking, maybe if we brought Mojave crusts up, it's a lot nicer here. They'll do better, and all this. But same thing, not so secret. It's all that when you drive along the high river road, it's those fences to keep the deer and cows out. Same thing, that we can keep them alive, but they do not thrive. And so we're kind of got the same problem again. Even though we brought it, the Mojave crust should love it, but they're just hanging on. Fire? It'll melt them. They don't like fire. No. Is that us?
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I think that's us. So
Woohoo!
thank you, everybody.
Woo!
A round for Jayne. and we'll get this movie queued up here in the next few. Appreciate it. Thanks for your questions, everyone.
Okay.